Thanks for coming, guys. I told Sloan I didn't care if he changed or not. He's had a busy afternoon. He didn't change, and I'm excited we had somebody worshiping in neon sneakers. It's awesome. Tonight, we're going to recap, and we're going to go a little bit different direction than we have some of the other messages. If you have missed any of the series we've been at, we're talking about 6 degrees of separation, and it's basically 6 aspects of life that can cripple or propel our walk with Christ. The first week we talked about worship, and we basically said we worship, period. But the only reason we're able to worship God is because Jesus alone was worthy. And the second week we talked about humility, and we talked about how humble people live out of a central understanding that it's not about me. And the third week, we talked about grace. And we identified that grace does not ignore sin, nor does it gossip about it, but it actually fuels and attracts people. And we identified grace as the unmerited favor of God, who is the unobligated giver. And the fourth week, we talked about generosity as a whole. We talked about generosity being the number one reason people leave churches, and that it's actually a heart condition, not a wallet condition, but when people start getting their wallets invaded, their heart starts getting hurt as well. And that God, the fifth week was generous people. And we talked about generous people understand that the money they have in their possession right now is going to be transferred in some capacity to someone else, and it may in fact not be all for their consumption, and that God loves to give to generous people. And last week we talked about obedience. Do I sound like I have a little echo going on? No, it's just me? Okay. It's probably all the empty space up here. The last week was obedience. And we talked about how in order to actually obey, we have to first surrender. And in order to surrender, we actually have to understand our identity and the need to surrender in order to obey. Otherwise, it's just checklist religion. Tonight we're going to talk about wonder. And wonder and worship are kind of interconnected in a way. And so it wasn't intentional, but I thought it was pretty cool that that's how the series landed. I read an article a few months ago, and the article was titled, Science and the Story That We Need. And there's an excerpt from an article I want to read here real quick. It says, in the end, science does not provide the answers most of us require. Its story of our origins and our end is, to say the least, unsatisfactory. To the question, how did it all begin, science responds, probably by an accident. And how will it all end, science responds, probably by an accident. And he says, and to many people, the accidental life is not worth living. So tonight we're going to look at some elements actually of science and how it does support the story we need. And we're going to look at a passage that David wrote thousands of years ago in Psalm 8. And he says this, he says, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? And many of us have heard this passage before. It is a reference to the coming Messiah being the Son of Man, but it is a verse that many of us can identify with in seasons of life where you feel like God has completely lost focus on you. And I have one confession as we start tonight, and that is I am one of the most easily amazed people that you may ever meet. Can we go to that first picture? Amber's my picture director tonight. First picture. Many of you have seen this. Some of you actually had this on your shoulder at one point in history. This is a boombox. I am amazed by the boombox. Okay? That little thing in the middle with the two eyes staring at you, there was actually a piece of tape that had sound on it, that it would go back and it would play one way, and then you'd flip it around and it would go the other way and it would play a whole new set of songs. Amazing. It had an antenna which would stretch out, and all radios, it grabs sound waves out of the air right now, sends them down into said boombox, and there's sound instantaneously. That amazes me. I can't even go into fiber optics because my head will explode, okay? The next picture, also amazing, is a Pepe Le Pew Komodo with a mullet attached, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why you don't put pictures on the internet. You don't want to be presented in slideshows at some point in the future. But you notice his boombox is also fairly impressive. And I'm in awe. You can take mullet down. Sorry. I'm in awe regularly, but even I can lose my sense of awe from time to time. Have you ever watched adults experience a fireworks show? Now, most of us have seen several fireworks shows in our lifetime. The one we're going to put up here is actually at Epcot, which is very impressive. That thing in the front is a globe that comes out of the water, which is pretty awesome. Next one. Obviously, it's a little bit of time going on there, but that's pretty cool. I was at Epcot several years ago, and there was the stereotypical Disney family in front of me, and it's like thousands of people around this lake, and this fireworks show is everything is choreographed to Disney music, and they've timed the sequence so that the right fireworks are going off at the right time. They're making the right explosion. The sound is reaching you at the right time with the symphony music and everybody else around you, and they do it every night at every park. Epcot is pretty cool because it's over the lake. But if you've ever watched the adults there, it's comical because this Disney family that's in front of me, it's the mom and dad, which are in like their mid-30s, and then two kids. And the little boy was probably, I'm guessing, 5, and the daughter was maybe 8, and the mouse ears and the whole 9 yards. And the dad turns. It's like this seismic shift of the crowd, like as this herding buffaloes. Everybody goes at the same time towards the exit, and the dad turns, and he's like 10 feet in front of me, and he just says to the family, "Wasn't that good?" And you're like, yeah, it's good. But, the problem is he's seen too many fireworks shows. If that's your comment at Epcot fireworks, you've seen one too many fireworks shows. My tennis ball tonight, oftentimes we go through the completely ordinary in life, and we miss that right now there is a subconscious firing of thousands and thousands of muscle fibers and tendons in my body. And that's powered by 86 billion neurons right now. 86 billion. I might have 85. I'm a little slow sometimes. But there's also a law of gravity that's going in effect right now that's actually pulling the ball back down towards itself. It's the reason I'm not floating. And gravity's working, as most of us know, 9.8 meters per second. And the reason that's working like that is because 1,400 miles below us, actually, it's not 1,400, it's 1,800. I say, how far is 1,800? 1,800 is the distance between here and Salt Lake City, Utah. Straight down, right now. There's the start of the Earth's core. And the Earth's core is 1,400 miles wide. You say, how far is 1,400 miles? 1,400 miles here to Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's the width. It's also magnetized. That's pretty cool quality. And it's spinning, unaided, at 1,000 miles an hour right now. 1,000 miles an hour. How far is that? It's here to College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska. 1 hour. Halfway across the country. And that's pretty cool in and of itself. But wait, there's more. Next picture. We're also slinging around this giant ball of fire we call our sun. We're moving it. That's just a perspective of our size compared to our very ordinary sun. Last picture. You can just leave that up for a second. See, we're getting slingshotted. We're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour right now. I'm bouncing the tennis ball. That's why we're moving like we are. But we're spinning, slinging around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. You're like, how fast is this? I don't know about you. I can't quite fathom that speed. It's 18.5 miles per second. That's here to the food court in Mall, Georgia, right now. Free sample. You're back. Free sample. You're back. free sample. Okay? You can eat in like a minute. You can eat a meal. But see, we're doing that because we're just far enough away from the sun that we don't get slung off in outer space, and we're just close enough that we don't burn up. Cool quality about the sun, it's 93 million miles away, which is a very good thing because the surface temperature of the sun is 10 million degrees. Coolest part of the sun, surface, 10 million degrees. And it is the perfect distance in a couple months that it'll ripen your tomatoes right now. Whether or not you and I ever notice or care, it's all happening. David said, when I consider your heavens and the works of your hands, why would you even bother? Why would you even care? Many of us think, as some of the famous atheists of the time often say, that God would, if there was a God, that he would pay attention to us, this very ordinary ball of dirt in a very ordinary solar system in a very ordinary galaxy. It's quite insane. And I think God's answer would be, not only do I pay attention, and we talked about last week how God's silence does not equal God's absence. Not only do I pay attention, but I'm going to put my fingerprints on you. You'll just have to do some looking to find it. The next picture. I took this picture. This is one of my most famous pictures. This is at the Hall County Prison. The person in front of me, I don't know whether it was male or female, had a mullet and had pom-pom fuzzy slippers at the jail during a weekday in the morning, getting somebody out of prison. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know. The guy in front of them, oddly enough, short side story, he was actually turning himself in for a crime. I don't know if that happens every day. That was pretty weird. But I was there getting my carry permit, and I don't know if you've ever been fingerprinted. It's a little bit nerve-wracking because you're thinking, I'm actually putting myself voluntarily into this database that I don't know if I want to be a part of, frankly. And there is this large female deputy with a gun and handcuffs and pepper spray and a taser, and she's got my fingers, and her hands are twice the size of mine, and she's doing this little, roll thing on the scanner, and I thought they did the ink, and they actually do this clear liquid, and it, goes into this computer, and I'm pretty sure, I'm instantly being monitored by the CIA, and she starts rolling my fingers, and she does this finger, my right index finger, and she goes, Now, I don't know if you've actually been into prison, been being fingerprinted, and had a police officer fingerprint your finger and say, but you start thinking of everything you have ever done that you have never been caught for. And I'm like, seriously, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't think anyone else was there for that, and I didn't see anybody around when that happened. I'm like, oh, and I said, Mom, what is it? And she said, honey, she said, don't ever, she pulled my finger up, so I look at it. She said, don't ever do nothing with this finger. She said, we're going to find you. I said, what do you mean? And I looked at the screen, and she says, you see this? She said, this is very unusual. See, my fingerprint actually goes two different directions on this finger. It's very distinct. I've been walking around with it for 30-some years. Never noticed. You know why? Never really looked. And many of us, as we go through this next thing, it's pretty cool. The big picture is God has placed awe and wonder all around us, the sun and the earth. The slightly smaller picture is that God had set awe and wonder upon us. In Psalm 139, I love this passage, many of you know it. It says, for you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works, that's fine. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them ever came to be. We see in numerous places in Scripture that God is identified as the restorer and the repairer of the broken. And I wanted you to check something out that is, I think, going to blow your mind. Many of you know, can we put the next picture up? Just leave that up for a second. Many of you know that's a picture of DNA. It's a supercoiled alpha helix. It's got our information, our basic makeup as human beings is part of it. If you were to unwrap a single strand, you'd have about 6 feet. We have about 6 billion of them inside of us. Go to the next picture. I'm sorry I don't have a better picture of this. I really couldn't find one, and I don't have a textbook. It has one in there. That yellow block right there is something called DNA polymerase. It is our most accurate enzyme as human beings. It is the keeper of our genetic information. And this little thing takes our DNA in its supercoiled alpha helix and it unwinds it. And it traces along silently, tracking along, doing its job. And you know what its job is? It's to build 2 complementary strands. But the problem is, we got problems in our DNA. And most of us don't realize that your DNA right now, like, breaks down. It causes, it's a result of the fallen nature. I don't know what it is, but our DNA is not perfect. And most of us know that. And if all this did was track along and do its thing, it would make one mistake in every 10,000 pairings. Now, I don't know how many things you can think of doing 10,000 times, but having no training, having no certifications, DNA polymerase is able to make one mistake in 10,000 pairs, which is pretty cool. It's pretty impressive, as is. The problem is, with 6 billion DNA strands, you and I would have about 600,000 errors in our basic structure and informational system of life. And the problem is, when you have a baby, guess what baby gets? 1.2 million. And guess what happens as that keeps going? The human population of Earth gets wiped out very quickly because the basic elements of life in us become so corrupted it's beyond repair, except for this thing. See, God knows, God knew, God designed every element of our lives. And this little thing, I'm going to try not to yell because I don't want to hurt anybody's ears. But it actually has several different departments. See, it has a testing department. And so when it creates a strand, it comes across an error and it recreates what was supposed to be there. Let's just say it's thymine that's supposed to be there. It recreates that. And that would be great if it just recreated it. But it doesn't just recreate it. You know what it does? It says, I wonder if the bond is strong enough. And so it has this little device, and it wiggles the bond to make sure that it will hold intact when it is divided. And if it doesn't, it's got a pair of scissors, and it clips it off, and it makes another one. That would be pretty cool because that improves the accuracy of the cell division 100 times, which is pretty significant. But wait, there's more. There's also a separate enzyme that follows it that has its own quality control department. And it tells the DNA polymerase, hey, you made a mistake back here. You went through. And the result is not 600,000 errors in the human body. It's 6. 6. That little thing. And that little thing operates 24/7, 365, whether or not you ever notice or acknowledge the God who installed it inside of you. Next picture. I'll give anybody $20 if you can name what that computer is. All right, good. I don't want to give that out anyway. This is called the Roadrunner. It's an IBM feat in 2008. It is the first supercomputer to ever break what is called the petaflop barrier. Now, I'll explain what that is in just a second. A flop, in order to understand what we're talking about here, a flop is a floating point operations per second. It is basically how many operations can this thing do in a split second. It is basically for scientific calculations, and we're going to start small here so our brains can acknowledge what this number is in a petaflop. A kiloflop is 1,000 operations per second. And to put this into perspective, 1,000 seconds ago is 11 minutes ago. We're going to go up one level to the megaflop. Many of us know megabyte is 1 million seconds ago. It's 11 and a half days ago. We're getting out there. A gigaflop, like a gigabyte, it's 1 billion. A billion seconds ago, 1978. Go up one more level. Teraflop, a trillion. A trillion flops. That's pretty impressive. Like 1492. The last one was 1978. A trillion seconds ago. It's 29,000 BC. A trillion seconds ago. Puts our national debt in the context of ever being repaid, doesn't it? And then we get to petaflop. And a petaflop is a quadrillion. A quadrillion operations per second. A quadrillion seconds ago, 3.1 million years. 3.1 million years. And this thing, this computer, has about a little shy of 20,000 dual-core processors. It takes up almost 6,000 square feet, which for many of us is 2 to 3 times the size of your house. It's one computer. It took 6 years and hundreds of people to become operational, and it cost $125 million. Next picture. That takes 9 months to develop, not 6 years. There's 2 people involved, not hundreds. It's free, not $125 million. It weighs about 3 pounds, takes up as much square footage as a grapefruit, and it'll fit in anybody's house. It has a processing speed of 268 miles per hour, which for NASCAR fans blows every record in NASCAR track out of the water. I believe the record at Talladega was 212. And scientists really don't know how many petaflops that is because they can't measure it. And they're guessing, the best guess is between 7 and 10 petaflops right now in 3 pounds of gray matter up here. 2008, the best science and technology has to offer, and $125 million and hundreds of people involved, we can get one. We can manufacture one. God said, I'm just going to make sure that there's nobody that can actually think that what you can think is by accident. And if you think it's by accident, then the logical question would be, how do I actually know my thoughts are the right thoughts if it just was by accident? But that, with no instruction other than the DNA that God has designed in us, develops in 9 months. And the next one many of you have seen before. This is called laminin. Louis Giglio made this famous, I think, several years ago in a DVD called How Great Is Our God. And it is a cell adhesion molecule. It is what keeps things like your skin on. It is the glue that holds our bodies together, and it is in the perfect shape of a cross. And the next slide, this is an actual laminin molecule. And it is God's signature, one of his many signatures on our lives, that says, not only do I pay attention, but I'm going to put my fingerprints on you. You just have to look to find them. Because when you seek me, you will find me. The third thing tonight we're going to look at is God has programmed awe and wonder within us. And this is the thing that I think is so incredible. I was reading an article several years ago in, I think it was Sky Mall. It's one of the airplane magazines. And it was just this secular article. It was something about this guy's vacation, and it didn't, I don't even know why I was reading it. But, I came across this paragraph, and I took a picture with my phone. It's still on my cell phone. And it's this guy who was scuba diving, and this is what he says. He says, I checked my depth gauge. It registered 100 feet, essentially the limit for recreational divers. We had navigated over the lip of a wall, coral reef wall he was describing earlier, so effortlessly that I had no idea we were already that deep. He says, I hovered and peered down into the void. It was more serene than I expected, and the only way I can think to explain it is that very rarely, if ever, do we have listen to this, do we have a chance to simply stare at nothing, but to also know that there's infinitely more going on, more life happening just beyond our gaze. It was peaceful, silent meditation on what might be. It was both humbling and awe-inspiring. Do you get how insane that sounds? If God has not programmed us to have the ability to be in awe and wonder. He said, I stared at nothing and I was in awe. You've never seen a herd of goats on a mountainside, just kind of looking up at the stars, being like, wow. That has never happened. And I was thinking about, if I were to give you a project, a science project, and say, I want you to create something that people can look at, and everybody that looks at it, it's just going to be like, wow, that is amazing. Not just a few people, not just the judges, every single person that looks at it is going to have the same reaction. Most of you, most of us, me, I would not take a black canvas and put a bunch of little flickering lights. Not real impressive. You don't even get the honorable mention at the science fair.